My name is Elise Moreau. I'm 24, a freelance journalist in Paris, the city that never truly sleeps, only changes its rhythm. Every night I walk past the glowing cafes, the whispering river, and those endless rows of street lamps that paint the city in shades of gold and loneliness. People see romance in Paris, I see stories hiding behind every smile, every silence, every shadow. There was a time when my own life looked perfect too. I was the daughter of Vivienne Laurent, the celebrated fashion designer whose name shimmered on the walls of every couture house in France. Our family seemed untouchable, elegant, disciplined, admired. But perfection, I've learned, is just another word for fear of cracks, fear of flaws, fear of truth. Life used to be a masterpiece, or at least that's how I tried to paint it. I wanted to believe that if I followed every rule, met every standard, and silenced every doubt, I could earn my mother's love. But under those same lights that made everything look beautiful, I began to see the curse my mother had created, a curse born not of hate, but of her obsession with control. My mother believed that beauty was discipline, that love was something you had to deserve, and in her world, imperfection was a sin. I grew up learning to measure myself, to hide my hunger, to keep my back straight and my voice soft. The more I tried to please her, the further I drifted from myself. This story isn't about fashion or fame or beauty. It's about love, the kind that binds, suffocates, and blinds you until you forget who you are. It's about the invisible cage built not from walls, but from expectations. And it's about the moment I decided to break free, no matter the cost. My life was once bathed in golden light, until that very light revealed the curse beneath it. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Vivienne Laurent was the kind of woman who could silence a room without saying a word. At 52, she was the reigning queen of Parisian fashion. Her name whispered in galleries, printed on magazine covers, and spoken with both reverence and fear. To the world, she was the embodiment of grace and discipline. A woman whose every move was measured, whose every word carried authority. But behind the glass walls of our elegant home, her perfection was a weapon. She didn't raise daughters, she sculpted projects. I was 8 when I began to understand that love in our house came with conditions. Every morning, Camille and I would stand before the tall mirror in her dressing room, a space that smelled of jasmine and expensive perfume, its walls lined with silk and silver. Maman would hold a measuring tape in one hand and a crystal glass of red wine in the other. The click of her heels on the marble floor echoed like a metronome of judgment. "Stand straight, Elise," she'd say sharply. "Chin up. Breathe in." The tape would wrap around my waist, cold and unforgiving. She'd jot down numbers in her leather notebook, her expression tightening if the figure displeased her. Camille, 3 years younger and naturally delicate, would always earn a nod of approval. "Très bien, Camille," Maman would murmur with a rare smile. "You are discipline made flesh." Then she'd turn to me, eyes narrowing, lips curving into a line too thin to be called affection. "Beauty," she'd say, "is discipline." It was her favorite phrase, her mantra, her law, her curse. From that moment on, I learned that beauty wasn't about grace or art or light. It was about control. Meals were measured, laughter was discouraged, and emotion was considered weakness. The dining table sparkled with crystal and silverware, but it felt like a courtroom where every bite was evidence of guilt. Camille moved through the world with the fragile precision of a ballerina. Light, obedient, silent. She seemed born to fit into Maman's idea of perfection. I, on the other hand, was the flaw in her masterpiece. I loved stories more than mirrors, words more than fabric. While Camille practiced her plies and arabesques, I hid in corners with my notebook, filling it with fragments of thoughts, the only place I was truly free. Maman would find me sometimes, scribbling in my room, and her tone would turn icy. "All these words," she'd say, flipping through my pages as if they were stains on silk, "they won't feed you. Control your body first, then your mind." Her presence filled every space, elegant, terrifying, inescapable. Evenings in our house were quiet performances of civility. She'd sip her wine slowly, eyes fixed on the reflection of herself in the window, the city lights dancing like jewels behind her. The soft clink of her glass against the marble table became the sound of my childhood, delicate yet ruthless. Camille would dance for her, moving like a puppet strung by love and fear, her feet blistered and bleeding but her smile unwavering. Maman would watch, head slightly tilted, murmuring corrections in a tone that made even praise sound like punishment. And me? I learned to shrink, to breathe quietly, to disappear into the wallpaper when her gaze found me. I used to think that if I could just write the right words, maybe she'd look at me the way she looked at Camille, with pride instead of disappointment. But words had no power in her world. Only symmetry did. To outsiders, our home was a temple of beauty, white orchids on every table, designer gowns hanging like ghosts in the hallway, the faint sound of classical music filling the air. But beneath that elegance was a quiet horror, 2 daughters molded not with love, but with precision. Looking back, I realized that my mother didn't just teach us how to be beautiful. She taught us to fear imperfection, to measure our worth in inches and approval. And in doing so, she built a prison, one wrapped in silk, polished with luxury, and locked from the inside by our own desire to please her. The Laurent estate shimmered like a cathedral of glass and gold that night. Beyond the manicured gardens and marble fountains, guests in tailored tuxedos and couture gowns drifted through the grand hall, their laughter mingling with the delicate chime of crystal glasses. It was the annual Laurent Couture Soirée, an event that defined the Parisian fashion calendar. Every camera flashed toward Vivienne Laurent 52, the woman who could turn silk into art and her daughters into ornaments. Elise was 12. Her satin dress, pale blue and stitched by her mother's own atelier, fit too tightly across her ribs. The zipper scratched the small of her back as she stood beside her sister Camille, who looked like a miniature mannequin, graceful, poised, already accustomed to admiration. Vivienne moved among the crowd like a queen among courtiers, her silver gown reflecting every chandelier. When she smiled, people leaned closer. When she frowned, silence spread like smoke. Elise's chest rose and fell quickly beneath the stiff fabric. The air smelled of roses and perfume layered too thickly, and she tried to breathe without drawing attention. A woman from Vogue Paris bent down and smiled. "Your daughter has such intelligent eyes," she said warmly. "A future creative mind, perhaps?" Vivienne's response was instantaneous, sharp enough to slice through the hum of conversation. "Don't flatter her," she said coolly, not even glancing at Elise. "She needs to learn discipline before she learns to dream." Laughter flickered around them. Uneasy, polite, complicit. Elise felt her throat tighten. Her sister's hand brushed hers briefly, but Camille's eyes were full of the same fear that lived in Elise's stomach. Vivienne turned away, her diamond earrings catching the light as she joined a group of editors. Elise stood frozen for a moment before her vision blurred. She whispered an excuse and slipped down the corridor. The party's brilliance faded behind her, replaced by the muffled echo of footsteps and the faint thrum of the orchestra. Inside the marble bathroom, she locked the door. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, the dress cutting into her shoulders like punishment. Her mother's words still rang in her head, "Discipline before dreams." Elise grabbed a pair of silver-handled scissors from the vanity table. Her hands trembled. For a second she hesitated, then she cut. The sound of ripping silk filled the room like a scream trapped in fabric. She sliced through the bodice, the hem, the delicate stitching her mother had once praised. Each tear released a little more air, a little more of the suffocating perfection that had caged her. When she stopped, the dress hung in shreds around her knees. She sank onto the tiled floor, her breath shaking, her fingers clutching the scissors. Beyond the door, music swelled. Violins, applause, champagne corks. But inside the small, dim bathroom, a 12-year-old girl sat surrounded by fragments of blue silk, discovering for the first time what defiance felt like. The moment didn't make her free, but it marked her first act of rebellion, her first whisper of no in a house built on "Yes, Mother." 3 years later, the Laurent mansion was quieter but no less suffocating. Camille, 15, spent her days rehearsing for the spring ballet showcase, a performance her mother had curated personally, as though her daughter's body were another collection to display. Vivienne's voice echoed daily. "Perfection is not a gift, it's a duty." The mirrors in Camille's dance studio reflected a girl stretched thin by expectation. Her cheeks were hollow, her leotard loose around the ribs. A half-empty bottle of diet pills sat beside her water flask, pale blue, labeled discreetly in her mother's handwriting. Elise, now 15 herself, often watched from the doorway after school, notebook in hand, pretending to read. She had learned silence, how it could protect her from her mother's scrutiny. But that afternoon the silence broke. Elise heard the thud before she saw her sister collapse. The sound was small, almost graceful, like the closing of a book. Camille's body crumpled onto the wooden floor, her arms trembling before going still. Elise screamed her name and ran to her, pressing her ear against her chest. A faint heartbeat, rapid and desperate. Panic surged through her. She grabbed the phone and called emergency services, her voice shaking as she described the scene in broken French. "She's 15, she's not waking up, please hurry." When the paramedics arrived, Elise's hands were still stained with chalk from the dance floor. As they carried Camille out, her eyelids fluttered. In a whisper so faint Elise almost missed it, Camille murmured, "I just wanted her to be proud." Those words would haunt Elise for years. At the hospital, the smell of disinfectant mixed with fear. Elise sat in the waiting area, knees pulled to her chest, while her mother arrived, immaculate, unbothered, still wearing her tailored coat. Vivienne's expression was unreadable. She didn't run, didn't ask questions. She simply glanced at the nurse and said, "She overdid it, didn't she?" "She took diet pills," Elise said, her voice breaking. "The ones from your cabinet." Vivienne's eyes hardened like marble. "Don't dramatize. She's always been emotional." Elise stared at her, realizing in that moment that her mother's love was not made of warmth, but of performance. Even here, in a sterile corridor, Vivienne's composure mattered more than her daughter's pulse. Later that night, when Vivienne went home to rest, Elise wandered into her mother's study. The room smelled of expensive perfume and paper. On the desk lay a leather-bound notebook. Out of instinct, Elise opened it. Inside were lists, meticulous, cold, terrifying. Camille, 48 kilograms, 46 target. Elise, posture correction needed. Possible placement Switzerland, Body Reform Institute, July. Every page recorded weight, waist size, calorie limits, even the exact brands of pills Vivienne had ordered under her assistant's name. At the bottom of one entry was a note in elegant handwriting. "If Elise continues resisting, consider sending her earlier." Elise felt the room spin. Her mother had planned to ship her away like an unfinished garment, something to be reshaped until it fit the design. She took out her phone, hands trembling, and began taking photos of every page. Flash after flash lit the dark study, capturing the truth one frame at a time. It was the first time she collected evidence, not against a criminal, but against a mother who had built an empire of control. Outside, the city slept under silver rain. Elise stood by the window, her reflection faint in the glass. Somewhere down the hall, her sister lay recovering, unaware of what Elise had just uncovered. The world saw Vivienne Laurent as a visionary of beauty. But Elise, 15 years old and finally awake, saw the cracks forming beneath the perfection. That night marked the true beginning of her awakening. The first step from silence into clarity, from obedience into rebellion. And though she didn't yet know it, the photos she took would one day become her protection, her proof, and her power. The morning it all fell apart began like any other. Sunlight spilling across the polished marble, Vivienne's perfume trailing down the staircase, and the faint clinking of silver spoons against porcelain cups. But beneath that fragile luxury, the house was trembling. Jacques Moreau, Elise's father, had returned earlier than expected from Geneva. A quiet, intelligent man with weary eyes, he had long been the invisible presence in the Laurent household. A financier who funded the empire but rarely raised his voice. For years, he had convinced himself that Vivienne's ways were simply strictness, the necessary price of brilliance. But when he walked into her study that morning and found the open leather notebook, its pages full of calorie charts, pill schedules, and the words Body Reform Institute, Elise, July, the illusion shattered. He read each line in silence, the ticking clock loud enough to make his pulse ache. The handwriting was unmistakable. Vivienne's control had always been visible. But this was something darker, systematic, deliberate, cruel. When Elise appeared at the door, clutching her school bag, her face pale. Jacques didn't look at her right away. He just whispered, "I should have protected you sooner." That night, the argument exploded. Vivienne stood in the dining room, framed by crystal chandeliers, her face a mask of calm fury. "You've misunderstood everything, Jacques," she said evenly. "Those notes were for their health. Do you know what it means to raise daughters in this world? Discipline is love." "Love?" Jacques' voice cracked. "You call starvation and pills love? You nearly killed Camille." "She fainted," Vivienne replied sharply. "Girls faint. It builds endurance." The silence that followed was the kind that breaks things. Elise stood in the doorway, frozen, while her mother's words echoed against the walls. For the first time, Jacques didn't stay quiet. He looked at his daughters, Camille pale and trembling, Elise standing protectively in front of her, and said, "Enough. This ends now." He packed a single suitcase that night and told Elise to come with him. Camille refused to move. "I can't leave her," she whispered, her hands shaking. "She needs me." Elise tried to reach for her, but Vivienne's cold eyes warned her not to. It was like watching someone you love sink slowly beneath ice. The car ride to Jacques' small apartment in the 9th arrondissement was silent except for the rain tapping the windows. Elise stared out, clutching her notebook, the city lights blurring like tears. When they arrived, Jacques made pasta, simple, buttery, imperfect, and placed it before her. She stared at it for a long time before daring to take a bite. The first real meal without fear. The first time she chewed and swallowed without hearing her mother's voice in her head counting calories. Life with her father was quiet. He wasn't expressive, but he was kind. He didn't comment on her appearance or her posture. He asked about her writing, bought her secondhand notebooks, and sometimes left small notes of encouragement. "You have a way with words just like your grandmother." Slowly, Elise began to rebuild herself. She learned to eat without guilt, to sleep without listening for footsteps. She wrote poems about silence, about mirrors, about dresses that cut too deep. And though she still carried the echo of her mother's voice, it grew fainter with time. But Camille remained behind, chained by loyalty and fear. Elise visited her occasionally, finding her thinner each time, her smile rehearsed. Camille would whisper, "Don't hate her. She's just lonely." And Elise would nod, though part of her wanted to scream, because she knew that pity could be as binding as cruelty, and Camille's pity was the chain her mother used best. The separation saved one daughter, but imprisoned the other. And somewhere in the quiet of Jacques' apartment, Elise realized that love, to survive, sometimes has to walk away. 10 years later, Elise stood once more before the Laurent mansion. The gate creaked open, revealing the same manicured gardens, the same marble fountains that had witnessed her childhood. She was 22 now, a writer with short hair, steadier breath, and a calmness that came from years of therapy and distance. Her father had urged her not to go, but she had received Camille's message. "It's Mother's birthday. She wants to see you. Please come." Elise didn't believe in please when it came from that house. Still, some fragile piece of her wanted closure, or maybe proof that she had survived what once broke her. Inside, nothing had changed. The air still smelled of perfume and expensive despair. Vivienne descended the staircase like an actress entering her stage. Draped in black silk, pearls at her throat, eyes sharp as ever. "Elise," she greeted coolly, kissing the air beside her daughter's cheek. "You've matured." Camille appeared behind her, pale and delicate, her beauty ghost-like. There was something absent in her gaze, like a flame burning low. She smiled faintly. "Happy you came." The table was set with precision. Vivienne poured glasses of a pale green liquid into crystal cups. "Detox water," she said with a serene smile. "After all, purity begins inside." Elise looked at the cup. "I'll pass, thank you." Her mother's expression froze. "Don't be childish. It's just spirulina and lemon." "I said no," Elise repeated, her tone firm but quiet. The air changed. Vivienne's voice lowered. "Camille, darling, hold her hands." Camille hesitated, eyes darting between them. "Mother, please. Do it." In that moment, the old fear returned, the command that once ruled their lives. Camille's trembling hands reached for Elise, as if caught between obedience and love. Vivienne stepped forward with the glass, her smile razor-sharp. But Elise pulled away, the chair clattering to the floor. Don't you dare, she said, backing toward the hallway. I'm not your project anymore. Vivienne's voice rose, controlled but venomous. Everything you are came from me. Even your rebellion. You think you escaped, but you carry me in your bones. Elise turned and ran. The sound of her mother's heels followed down the marble corridor. She darted into the nearest room, the same bathroom where she had once destroyed her blue dress, and locked the door. Her breath came fast. The mirror reflected a woman no longer afraid, though her hands still trembled like that 12-year-old girl years ago. She pulled out her phone and called her father. Dad, she said, voice shaking, I need you to come. Now. Where are you? At her house. I shouldn't have come. She hung up before he could speak again. Her pulse raced. Then suddenly the phone vibrated. An incoming message from an unknown number. Amélie from Laurent Couture. Amélie had been Vivienne's assistant for years. A woman Elise remembered as kind but silent. The message contained a single voice memo and a short line. You deserve to know the truth. Elise pressed play. Vivienne's voice filled the bathroom, calm and unmistakable. Camille will never reach the weight I need unless she continues the supplements. Yes, I know they're restricted. I don't care. Perfection demands sacrifice. Elise froze. Her stomach turned. It wasn't just cruelty, it was crime. Her mother had admitted, in her own words, to giving Camille banned substances. Tears blurred her vision. She leaned against the cold marble wall, the past and present colliding in her mind. The blue dress, the pills, the hospital room, Camille's whisper. I just wanted her to be proud. Elise looked at her reflection. She no longer saw the scared girl. She saw a woman holding proof. Proof that the world needed to see. Proof that silence had protected the wrong person for too long. She texted Amélie back. Keep this safe. I'll handle the rest. Then she unlocked the door, stepped out of the bathroom, and walked toward the front hall. Vivienne stood by the piano, still immaculate, still powerful. But when Elise met her eyes, something in that perfect mask flickered. A shadow of fear. Because this time Elise wasn't running away. She was walking out on her own terms. Behind her, the chandelier light fractured across the marble floor, scattering into 1,000 sharp fragments, like the illusion that had finally, irreversibly, broken. The sirens shattered the stillness of the Laurent estate. Blue and red lights danced across the marble façade as officers rushed through the gates. Elise stood on the front steps, her hands trembling, watching as the paramedics carried Camille out on a stretcher. Her sister's body looked impossibly fragile, pale lips, limp wrists, a small tube of clear liquid still taped to her arm. Vivienne followed behind, her heels clicking in perfect rhythm, her voice eerily calm. She's just exhausted, she said to the officers. Overworked from rehearsals. I told her to rest, but she's too ambitious. Elise wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. She knew now what had really been flowing through that line. The same forbidden supplements Vivienne had mentioned in the recording. The poison of perfection. At the hospital, chaos dissolved into fluorescent quiet. The scent of antiseptic filled the air. Camille was rushed into intensive care, while Elise sat outside the ward, her hands clasped, her breath shallow. Across the corridor, her mother was already in motion, whispering to doctors, handing over cards, smiling with rehearsed grace. Every move was precise, deliberate, rehearsed. Elise caught fragments of conversation. Private recovery facility in Florence. Special treatment plan. No police report, please. She watched as Vivienne slipped an envelope into a nurse's pocket, the woman nodding nervously before walking away. It was the same strategy she had used all her life. Elegance as camouflage, charm as manipulation. That's when Julien appeared. A young nurse with kind eyes and an expression that suggested he'd seen more than he should have. He crouched beside Elise, lowering his voice. You're Elise Moreau, right? She nodded. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Inside was a photo of a medicine vial. The label read Somnotrex D, a restricted stimulant once banned in France after several cases of cardiac collapse. She's been using this? Elise whispered. Julien nodded. I found it among your mother's supplies. She told the staff it was a vitamin infusion. It isn't. I tried to stop her, but she threatened to end my contract. Elise's pulse quickened. She took a photo of the paper, her mind racing. Why are you helping me? Julian hesitated. Because your sister won't survive another dose. And because I once had a mother like hers. For the first time that night, Elise felt less alone. But the relief didn't last. Later, she overheard Vivienne talking to a hospital administrator in the hallway. Camille will be transferred tomorrow, she said smoothly. To our rehabilitation center in Italy, just a short stay until she's stable. Elise stepped forward. Italy? She needs medical care, not exile. Vivienne turned, eyes glinting. You've done enough damage. You filled her head with nonsense, and now you're trying to destroy me with your delusions. Go home, Elise. I'm not a child anymore, Elise said quietly. And you're not going to bury the truth this time. Her mother smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Truth is a matter of presentation. You of all people should understand that, writer. That night, Elise couldn't sleep. The hospital lights flickered through the window blinds, painting thin white bars across her face like a cage. Around midnight, she slipped out of her chair and walked down to the underground parking lot to get some air. That's when she saw them, her mother standing near a black Mercedes, speaking to a man in a gray suit. The air was cold and wet, echoing with the faint hum of engines. Vivienne handed him a thick envelope. Her tone was low but sharp, carrying just enough for Elise to catch one line through the concrete. Handle the Elise problem. The words sliced through her chest like glass. She froze behind a pillar, heart hammering. The man nodded, tucking the envelope into his coat before driving away. Vivienne lingered for a moment, her reflection shimmering in a puddle of rain and oil, then turned and walked back toward the elevators, graceful as ever, unaware she'd been watched. Elise raised her phone, snapped a photo, her fingers trembling. The flash of the screen lit her face for a second, enough to remind her how deep this had gone. This wasn't just family control anymore. It was corruption, obstruction, a mother willing to destroy her own child to preserve an empire of lies. She backed away slowly, clutching the phone to her chest. Her body shook not from fear, but from realization. The danger had escaped the walls of their home. It had entered the world, disguised as prestige and perfection. And this time she would not run. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, photographers, members of the fashion elite. The trial of Vivienne Laurent had become Paris's spectacle of the year. Vivienne sat poised at the defense table, wearing a charcoal suit that seemed chosen to project both elegance and humility. Around her, a team of high-priced lawyers and PR strategists whispered in rehearsed unison. Every expression, every sigh was part of the performance. She was no longer the queen of couture. She was the victim of misunderstanding. Elise entered quietly, accompanied by her father, Jacques, and two key witnesses, Amélie and Julian. The murmur of the crowd softened as she took her seat. Cameras clicked like the mechanical heartbeat of truth closing in. When it was her turn to testify, Elise walked to the stand, her voice steady but soft. My mother believed beauty required sacrifice, she said. She told us that love was measured by control. My sister nearly died because of that belief. The defense tried to twist her words, accusing Elise of exaggeration, of seeking attention. But then came the evidence. Amélie stepped forward first, presenting the original audio recording. Vivienne's voice admitting the use of restricted substances. The room fell silent as the words echoed through the speakers. Then Julian produced the hospital photograph, the vial labeled Somnitrex D, marked with Vivienne's personal seal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But the true breaking point came when the prosecution revealed the final piece. A security video from the hospital, dated the night before Camille's collapse. The screen flickered to life. There was Vivienne, elegant even in shadows, leaning over her daughter's hospital bed. She held a syringe, checked her watch, and then calmly injected the contents into Camille's foreline. The courtroom erupted. Flashbulbs burst like lightning. Vivienne's composure cracked for the first time, her jaw tightening, her eyes darting toward Elise with a look that was neither anger nor regret, but disbelief that her control had finally slipped. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. The empire had fallen. As officers approached, Vivienne whispered something only Elise could hear. You think you've won. But you're still my creation. Elise looked at her, her voice calm. No. I'm your consequence. The metallic click of handcuffs cut through the chaos. Cameras flashed, illuminating Vivienne's face. No longer flawless, no longer untouchable. Just human, under the same harsh light she had once used to judge everyone else. As they led her away, Elise stood still, breathing deeply. The light from the photographer's flashes bathed her in white, the same light that once terrified her as a child. But this time it didn't blind her. It revealed everything. The curse had been broken. The truth at last was free. Camille left Paris after the trial. She's now recovering at a therapy center in Lyon. A quiet place filled with sunlight, lavender gardens, and the sound of wind brushing through the trees. Her breath has grown steady again, her voice soft like early spring air. Elise visits one afternoon, carrying a bouquet of white tulips. The two sisters sit together on a wooden bench in the garden, hands intertwined, silence speaking louder than any words could. For the first time in years there's no judgment between them. Only tenderness, fragile but real. Vivienne Laurent, once the celebrated fashion icon, has been sentenced to 10 years in prison. The tabloids call it the fall of perfection. Yet from her cell she still sends Elise letters. Elegant handwriting on fine stationery, filled with bitterness. In every line she accuses Elise of betraying the family legacy, of destroying what she had built. But Elise no longer trembles when she sees her mother's name on the envelope. She reads the letters calmly, then folds them away without reply. As Elise leaves the center that day, the sun is setting, golden light spilling across the courtyard. She pauses, watching Camille wave from the window. In her heart, something finally settles. The fear that once clung to her like shadow is gone. In her voiceover, Elise says, "I am no longer afraid of the light, because now I know light doesn't only expose the truth, it redeems the soul." Lessons learned. 1. Perfection can be the mask of deep wounds. 2. Love does not control, it protects. 3. Courage sometimes begins with the word no. 4. Blood ties don't always mean safety. 5. Light only matters when we dare to face the darkness within. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread stories of strength and hope. Comment below. When did the light in your life first begin to shine?